Number 1.
Anisha and her brother Ivan are twins, the offspring of Patricia Fowler. The twins' disappearances were discovered in the summer of 2016. On June 20, police went to the Fowler home on Bryant Street in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with orders from Allegheny County's Department of Children, Youth and Families, CIF, to remove all of Patricia's children from her custody. She was under investigation for medical neglect of 4 of her children. All of them have serious medical conditions, and they had missed approximately 6 dozen medical appointments in total. The police removed the 4 children they found at the home, but on July 6, the CIF agency officials told them there were supposed to be 6 children. Both police and CIF were unable to find either Ivan or Anisha, who would have been 17 years old by this time. Details regarding the twins' disappearances are extremely sketchy. September 11, 2006 is the listed date of disappearance. They were 7 years old at the time. However, family members haven't seen them since 2002 or 2003, when they would have been toddlers, and 2 landlords who rented to Patricia between 2006 and 2015 are sure Ivan and Anisha never lived with her. The only available photograph was taken when Ivan and Anisha were infants. When questioned about her children's whereabouts, Patricia told several different stories, including that they were living with various friends or relatives in North Carolina, South Carolina and Georgia. At one point she claimed she'd sold Anisha and Ivan to a casual acquaintance named Barbara for $2,000 each. Patricia retracted this statement when she was told it was a criminal offense to sell a child. Police have been unable to verify any of her explanations for her son and daughter's whereabouts. In an interview with WTAE, a Pittsburgh television station, Patricia stated a Cheryl Willis, a friend of the family, had stepped in and helped and taken them, initially to North Carolina, about 10 years back. She said her children had moved with Willis to Georgia when they were 13. Patricia had not mentioned Willis's name to law enforcement. She told WTAE she is learning disabled and became confused during the interrogation, but maintained, "I didn't sell my kids, and they're not missing." In August 2016, Patricia was charged with endangering the welfare of children, obstructing a child welfare investigation, and concealing the whereabouts of the children. Later that same month her 18-year-old son, Datwin Fowler, was charged with intimation, relation or obstruction in child abuse cases, criminal conspiracy, obstructing administration of law or other government function, and giving false identification to law enforcement. He admitted he'd contacted police via a Facebook message and a cellular phone text message, both times claiming he was Ivan, and that Ivan and Anisha were in the Atlanta, Georgia area. He told investigators he sent the messages so they would stop bothering him and his mother with questions about the twins' whereabouts. Photos of Datwin and Patricia are posted with this case summary. In May 2017, a judge threw out most of the charges against Patricia, leaving only the one of unsworn falsification in relation to her misleading statements to the police. A police officer who testified at the hearing said he believed Anisha and Ivan were dead, based off of Datwin's statements that they were sick when he last saw them over a decade earlier. However, the judge stated there was insufficient evidence that Patricia had endangered or harmed the twins or concealed their whereabouts from their father, and that she could not have obstructed justice in a child abuse case because there was no evidence of child abuse. Other charges against Patricia remained outstanding, however. In July, she pleaded guilty to endangering the welfare of a child, unsworn falsification and public assistance false statements. She was sentenced to 4 years of probation and was ordered to pay $57,000 in restitution. This was the public assistance payments she'd received for Ivan and Anisha after they were no longer in Patricia's care. As part of the plea agreement, the charges against Datwin were dropped. On November 8, 2000, when Ivan was 2 years old, he was severely burned over 46% of his body. His mother didn't call an ambulance until the next day, and he remained hospitalized until December 13. Patricia claimed Ivan's older brother had accidentally scalded him in the bath. The twins were both taken from Patricia's care after that incident, but they were returned within a couple of days, and CIF caseworkers never notified police. CIF continued to have contact with the Fowler after that, mostly involving Patricia's failure to make sure her children attended school. There is no record of Ivan or Anisha ever having been enrolled in school in Pennsylvania or other states, and none of the relatives police have been able to locate either had the children or knew their whereabouts. 2 of the twin siblings stated first one, and then the other was simply gone one day. The social worker who thought they saw the twins in 2006 later admitted they might have been mistaken, as the child they thought was Ivan didn't appear to have the extensive scarring he should have had from his scalding. In spite of this, both Patricia and Atwin insist Anisha and Ivan are alive and well. Their cases remain unsolved.
Number 2.
Paula and her son, Brandon, were last seen at their residence at Common Apartments in Valdosta, Georgia on October 14, 2002. They were reported missing when Paula failed to show up for work at Sam's Club and failed to call to tell them she would not be in. One of Paula's co-workers visited Common Apartments twice looking for her. There was no sign of her or her son. Her vehicle, a 1998 Chevrolet Blazer, was still parked at the residence. The child safety seat inside the car, however, had been removed. Paula's husband has been ruled out as a suspect in his wife and child's disappearances. He is a soldier who was stationed at the Shaw Air Force Base in Sumter, South Carolina, when Paula and Brandon vanished. He has passed a polygraph. However, Paula and Brandon's roommate has allegedly been uncooperative in the case. He was asked to take a polygraph test but refused and hired a lawyer. An acquaintance of the roommates told police where he thought Paula and Brandon's remains might be. When the location was searched, nothing was found but deer bones. Loved ones of the family say it would be extremely uncharacteristic for Paula to take her son and leave without warning or to miss work without notice. Her parents maintained weekly telephone contact with her. Paula had been approved for a transfer to a Sam's Club job in Kissimmee, Florida, and her family was supposed to help her prepare to move during the week of her and Brandon's disappearance. Brandon and Paula are considered endangered. They have not been seen or heard from since October 2002.
Number 3.
Natasha was last seen asleep on the sofa in the living room of her family's home in the 900 block of Maple Avenue in Jackson, Michigan. Her mother awoke in the early morning hours of May 8, 1985, to the sound of a car door slamming outside. She fell back asleep and awoke again at 6 a.m. Natasha's mother discovered that her daughter was missing from their residence at that time. One of the doors to their house was wide open, and there was no trace of Natasha. She has never been heard from again. It is believed she either wandered away or was abducted between the hours of 1:30 and 6 a.m. Natasha's mother's live-in boyfriend, Robert F. Forbes, was found shot to death near his own mother's house 2 days after Natasha disappeared. His death was ruled a suicide, but there is some suspicion that he was murdered. Forbes was a drug dealer and had served a prison sentence for trafficking heroin. Authorities do not believe his crimes or his death are necessarily related to Natasha's case, however. At the time of Natasha's disappearance, she attended a special education school for children with disabilities. She cried often and had mood swings, and she enjoyed playing with makeup, singing, and playing with purses and shoes. There have been no substantial leads in her case, and an extensive search of the neighborhood turned up no sign of her. She is believed to be deceased. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 4.
Daneault was last seen leaving a private social club in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire at 1:30 a.m. on June 8, 1980. She left the club, saying she was going to a party, and has never been heard from again. Few details are available in her case. Daneault was divorced, with 2 young sons, at the time of her disappearance, and lived with a roommate in the 300 block of Hayward Street in Manchester. It's uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. Laureen Ron, a 14-year-old girl who lived on Merrimack Street just 2 blocks from Daneault, disappeared 6 weeks before Daneault did and was never found. She and Daneault reportedly closely resembled each other in spite of the difference in their ages, but it has never been shown that their disappearances were linked. Daneault also lived just a few doors down from suspected serial killer Terry Peter Rasmussen, who was living in the area under the name Bob Evans, one of his many false identities, at the time. Photos of Rasmussen as he appeared in 1985 and in 2002 are posted with this case summary. He pleaded guilty to murdering his wife in California in 2003 and died in 2010. Authorities believe Rasmussen was responsible for at least 5 more deaths, including the murder of Denise Bowden, who disappeared from Goffstown, New Hampshire in 1981 and was never found, the murders of an unidentified woman and 3 female children whose bodies were found in a wooded area near Bear Brook State Park in Allenstown, New Hampshire. Investigators don't know whether Rasmussen was involved in Daneault's case but are investigating a possible connection. Her disappearance remains unsolved.
Number 5.
Richard, his mother Virginia and his younger brother Reagan were last seen on September 12, 1980. They were leaving Virginia's mother's residence in Riverton, Wyoming at approximately 1:30 p.m. and driving the family's station wagon to meet Virginia's ex-husband, Gerald Uden. He was going to take Reagan and Richard bird hunting and the boys had a rifle in the car with them. They never arrived at their destination and have never been seen again. The Uton's 1973 Ford station wagon, which Virginia had borrowed from her mother, was found abandoned and vandalized on October 4, 1980, nearly 1 month after she and her sons had disappeared. The station wagon was located in the vicinity of the 700 block of North Federal Court in Riverton, Wyoming, near Dixon Park Road and Trout Creek Canyon, in the Wind River Canyon region of Fremont County. It appeared as if someone had tried to push it into the canyon, but it had become lodged on some rocks 75 feet from the top. Someone then tried to conceal it by covering it with pine branches. Large amounts of Virginia's blood were found all over the car's interior. Photographs of Gerald and his current wife, Alice Louise Uton, are posted with this case summary. They moved to Missouri sometime after Virginia, Reagan and Richard disappeared. In September 2013, Gerald and Alice were arrested and charged with murder. Gerald was charged with the murders of Virginia and her sons. He was not their biological father, but he had legally adopted them. In October 2013, he pleaded guilty to all 3 murders and provided a detailed account as to what happened. Gerald stated he shot Virginia, Richard and Reagan with the .22 caliber rifle they were going to use for bird hunting. He admitted the murders were premeditated and said he shot them after they got out of the car at a canal near Pavilion in Fremont County, Wyoming. Gerald put the bodies in large drums and dumped them in Fremont Lake, which is approximately 450 feet deep. In exchange for his guilty pleas, Gerald was sentenced to life in prison. He referred to Virginia as a predator and showed no remorse for his actions. Alice was charged with murdering her husband, Ronald Holtz. They married in September 1974, and he disappeared sometime after Christmas that year. Prosecutors claimed she shot him in the head with a .22 caliber rifle and dumped his body in an abandoned gold mine, and it wasn't found until August 2013. Alice had long been a suspect in Holtz's disappearance, and in 1989, a witness said she'd confessed to his murder, but the police didn't have enough evidence to make a case against her until his body was located. Alice was tried in the spring of 2014. She claimed Holtz was abusive and she shot him to protect her daughter from him. She was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Foul play is suspected in the Uton's cases due to the circumstances involved.
Number 6.
David was last seen in Jefferson City, Tennessee. That day after school he said he was going to go to a church function up the street from his home on Beeler Avenue. He did go to the church, but he didn't go inside and instead went to Druther's restaurant. The restaurant had a policy that children who presented report cards with a good grades could get a free meal. David's school report card had just come out that day and he had an A in physical education, so the restaurant gave him a free hamburger. It's unclear where David went afterwards. There are different reports, including one that he watched television at a friend's home and left for home at 7 p.m. He has never been heard from again. David's family didn't realize he wasn't home until the next morning. His bed covers were arranged in a way to make it look like he was in bed asleep. At first they thought he'd spent the night at his friend's house, as he often did. When his disappearance was reported to the police, investigators believed he might have run away, but his family never believed this. There was a tip that David was living in Florida with a cousin of his biological father, but this was discounted. David's father, who is now deceased, said he did not know his son's whereabouts. According to his family, David was extremely friendly, even to strangers, and could have easily been lured into a stranger's car. Authorities believe he may have been abducted and murdered, but little evidence is available in his case. David's mother was unmarried and only a teenager when he was born, so his grandmother legally adopted him and raised him. He was close to his mother throughout his whole life, however. He was a 4th grade student at Jefferson City Elementary School in 1983, and although he wasn't a good student and had had to repeat the year, his loved ones described him as a bright, streetwise, pleasant boy. His case remains unsolved.
Number 7.
Randy was last seen in Newark, New Jersey on August 20, 1978. He was with 4 friends, Michael McDowell, Melvin Pittman, Ernest Taylor and Alvin Turner. The 5 teens played basketball in West Side Park that evening, then got into a pickup truck driven by Lee Anthony Evans, a local carpenter who often hired them for odd jobs. Evans said he dropped the boys off at 11 p.m. Randy and his friends have never been heard from again. Authorities believe they disappeared from the area of Clinton Avenue and Fabian Place. Several days after the disappearances, one of the boys' mothers got a phone call from someone who claimed he knew their whereabouts and would tell her for $750. The call was traced to a payphone at Union Station in Washington, D.C. Police went there to investigate, but by the time they arrived the caller was gone. This individual has never been identified, and it is unclear whether he actually knew anything about the cases. Police believed the boys had run away, but their family members all said this was uncharacteristic of their behavior. Michael had a minor police record from being involved in a fistfight, but Randy, Melvin, Ernest and Alvin had never been arrested. All of them except Michael lived in Newark and were students at Wequahic High School. Michael had recently moved to East Orange, New Jersey. Many of the missing teens' relatives are now deceased. Their social security numbers haven't been used since they went missing, and none of them has applied for a driver's license in any state. In March 2010, Evans and another suspect, Philander Hampton, were charged with 5 counts of murder and arson in the missing teens' cases. Photos of Evans and Hampton are posted with this case summary. Authorities stated there was a third suspect, Maurice Woody Olds, but he died of natural causes in 2008. The 3 men were cousins. Evans had been a suspect in the case at the beginning, but he passed at least one polygraph test, and the case went cold for decades, owing to lack of evidence. It wasn't until a witness came forward in 2008 that the police were able to make progress in the investigation. Investigators believe the 5 teens were killed because Evans and Hampton thought they'd stolen marijuana from them. The men allegedly took the boys to an unoccupied house in the 200 block of Camden Street, forced them inside at gunpoint, restrained them, locked them in and set the home on fire. The house burned to the ground and the fire spread to adjacent residences. Authorities do not know where the bodies are. They searched the site of the former Camden Street residence with ground-penetrating radar but found no evidence of human remains. In August 2011, Hampton pleaded guilty to 5 counts of felony murder. He claims Evans orchestrated the crimes and stated the boys were confined to a closet and the closet door was nailed shut. He agreed to testify at his cousin's upcoming trial. Hampton was sentenced to 10 years in prison for this role in the crimes. Going by 1978 sentencing and parole guidelines and taking into account the time he's already served awaiting trial, he could be released from custody in less than a year. He will also be given $15,000 after his release to assist with his relocation. Hampton testified against Evans at the latter's trial in November 2011. He was the star witness. Evans defended himself and presented few witnesses. There was no physical evidence to link him to the crime, and Hampton is a career criminal and drug addict. Evans was acquitted of all charges against him. Foul play is suspected in the teens' disappearances due to the circumstances involved.